Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Farmers Business Network has helped thousands of farming entrepreneurs reduce their cost of production and maximize the value of their crops. Now FBN membership is free. Sign up for free today and pursue your prosperity with Farmers Business Network.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. We have Heather Watson from Farm Management Canada joining us once again this week. Welcome back, Heather.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you're having me back again.
I am so excited. Any day that I can talk about farm business management is a great day. And I know you are equally passionate, so I love having you on the show. Last week, if you guys joined us, you know that Heather and I spoke about Farm Management Canada, the different conferences and programs that they offer. This week, I really want to dive into two studies that Farm Management Canada has done that really explore the connection between farm business management practices and mental health for farmers. So welcome, Heather. For those that didn't join us on last week's episode, can you tell us a little bit more about you and your position and your organization?
Of course, yes. So I'm Heather. As you've heard, I'm Executive Director here at Farm Management Canada. I joined the organization in 2009 and I took a leadership position in 2010. So it's been a long time, but it's been really good. And as Tracy mentioned, her passion for farm business management, and it's something I get to look at and think about and work on every single day. And I find it fascinating, and even more fascinating the more folks we talk to and the more interesting projects we undertake. So really pleased to be working in this space. Farm Management Canada, a little bit about us. So we're a national nonprofit organization. So we were started in 1992, just after the farm financial crisis. Government and industry kind of were looking at, okay, well, that didn't go so well for some of us. How can we better protect ourselves and manage risk going forward? So they turned to investing in farm business management and specifically skills development to kind of increase our competitiveness, increase our resilience, and increase profitability. So that's where we came from, and kind of our mission and mandate is to increase the adoption and awareness of farm business management practices and the value thereof. So we're really happy to be here today to share some of our research and insights into that very topic.
Excellent. Again, if you guys didn't catch last week's episode, check it out. There are so many tools, resources, great stuff on the website. Now today, I really want to dive into the two studies you guys did, because I think it's one thing to ignore. We all know that we should exercise and eat healthy and be better business managers. We know that, and it does help our business dollars and cents wise, and that is so important. But I love that you guys did that one study, and then you did a second one on the connection between how you manage your farm business and the effects it has on mental health. And you know, in a world of farming where we have a lot that is out of our control, to me, it only makes sense that we should implement some of these practices, if not for the bottom line, for our mental health up here. So I'm going to get you to start with the dollars and cents study. Tell us a little bit more about that one. And then I want to roll into the healthy minds, healthy farms, and explore that connection with the mental health. So take it away.
Super. No, that's great. And it makes sense because, I mean, that's kind of the order that we thought about doing these studies in too. So I guess Our first challenge was and is and continues to be, how do we convince the egg industry that there's value in farm business management practices, that it's not just all, hot air and a big hoax, but it actually does make a difference. And we thought, well, money talks. So maybe what we should do is look at, what is the financial impact of adopting some of these practices. So back in 2015, we actually did the first version of the dollars and cents study. And we looked at, okay, first and foremost, what are the business practices being adopted on Canada's farms? Love it or not, like this is the reality, this is the baseline we're starting with. And then we also looked at, separately, part of the same study, we used raw data working with the farmers to determine, what's kind of happening on the financial side, and use that to come up with a financial performance score. And then so we looked at, okay, now we have the kind of financial performance score of these farmers. So who's in the top 25%? Who's in the bottom 25%? And what's the difference? Like, what kind of practices are the top ones practicing that the bottom ones aren't, and this, that, and the other? What's really the differentiating factor between our top and bottom farmers based on financial performance? And so at the end of the day, that study found three things. A, it found what are the adoption of practices, of course. B, it found what is the difference financially between top and bottom farmers? That is to say, what can farmers expect to gain by adopting these practices, and to what degree? And spoiler alert, we did a whole bunch of financial ratios, but one of the ones that stood out to me most was profitability. And it showed the difference in profitability between the bottom 25% and the top 25% was 525%.
Wow.
And so in kind of dollars, that's the difference between making, $2,000 in profit and $100,000 in profit. So we thought, okay, we finally have the numbers to prove that this stuff is real and meaningful. And then the third thing that it did was looking at those differentiating farm business management factors, what are those factors that have the highest correlation to success on the farm? And so we came up with the 7 practices driving farm financial performance. And it was really interesting because, when we did this study, we thought we could find nothing. Like we could find that we've been wasting our energy and time and passion for all these years because there is no connection. And then we thought, well, and what if it says all the practices are, it's just all that matters is doing budgeting, or all that matters is doing this or whatever. But it's interesting because the results showed, so the number one practice that differentiated top and bottom farmers was lifelong learning, was a commitment to skills development. Any skills development. So, watching an episode like this, Tracy, or going to a conference or going to a meeting, watching a webinar, all of that, contributes. And I think if I remember the adoption rates correctly, 50% of farmers were actively looking at, lifelong learning opportunities and skills development opportunities, whereas the rest aren't. And so that was kind of differentiating factor. Some of the other things in the top 7 were, I think number 2 was having an accurate, record keeping system for farm financials and referring back to that for decision making. So, talk about cost of production and the importance of that, as well as using farm advisors. So we have this saying, do your best and hire the rest. And so knowing your own passions, but also your own limits, and how you can bring folks into your farm team that are experts in that area so that you are covering your bases is very important. And not being afraid to ask for help from members of your team, of course, but also farm advisors. That's what they're there for. And then I remember number 4 was having a written business plan, following it, and reviewing it on a regular basis, say at least once a year, and using it for decision making. So, for example, when when land comes up for sale, your neighbor's farm comes up for sale, instead of just saying, oh my God, it's a hot commodity and resources are limited, let's just buy it. It's saying, okay, well, what was our overall plan for the business? And does this fit into it? And if it doesn't, does it mean we want to alter our plan? Because a plan is not written in stone. It's not meant to be. It's a living document. But there needs to be, a level of commitment to this is where we want to go. And these are our criteria for making decisions in that direction. So anyways, and then a lot of the rest was surprise about planning, about risk assessment and planning, financial planning, and all those wonderful things. So yeah, and that is totally available. Now, that was 2015. In 2020, we thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see how the needle has moved in 5 years? So it has been very interesting. I feel like I need another spoiler alert here, but really interesting to see how things have changed. So we wanted to look, we're like, okay, we know that, what matters or that we've already proven the connection between business management and financial performance. Okay, that's one and done. What else do we need to understand? Like, what other kind of rocks do we need to look under to help resolve this issue of, the agriculture sector not really believing in the power of managing the farm as a business? So we thought, well, maybe let's understand better the drivers and the barriers to adoption. So why aren't you adopting? Like, what is it about business practices? Is it because they're daunting? Is it because you're not sure where to start? Is it because the advisors aren't out there? Is it because it's costly, etc.? And then on the other side, for those of you who have done it and they're the believers like you and me, what has been the impact? Like, what motivated you and what keeps you motivated to do these practices? Because maybe by answering those questions, we can try and help resolve some of the barriers, but also share some of those motivators as a carrot to get more producers interested in this stuff. Because perhaps not everyone's motivated by profitability. Perhaps there's some other things that are motivating people. So that's what our 2020 study has done. Okay. And I'm happy to share the results, but I will take a breath just in case you have any questions or you're dying to know one thing or the other.
No, that's great. What a great study. There's so much in there that is so important for farmers that I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. So continue on. I don't know if you want to dive into the drivers and barriers in a little bit more detail, or you want to do that? Yeah.
Let's do that. That makes sense. Because there's just such a story around all this stuff, and I love it. So the greatest barriers from the mouths of our farmers. So farmers reported that the greatest barrier, so number one barrier, was they're succeeding without them. So they're doing well enough without doing business practices. No thanks. I don't need a business plan. I don't need to do budgeting. I'm doing fine. Thanks very much.
Sorry, interrupt. For anybody watching or listening to the podcast version, there is a very dirty look on Tracy's face right now. For anybody watching,
that's an important disclosure.
I have to say, for anybody that has the pleasure of watching the video, they're seeing my face. If I'm quiet and you're not seeing my face, you got to know that I'm just appalled by that statement. How is doing well enough a good excuse? You're not hurting, you're not going broke, so you don't need to do better. Anyway.
Yeah. And what we'll talk about later is perhaps what we need to do is look further into how they define success. And I think some of the answers to that might be hidden in the motivators and drivers.
Oh.
So
carry on.
Yes. So yes, we're succeeding without them. We don't need them. Okay. And we also we look back at the last 5 years, and mind you, this study was done and finished just before COVID. So we don't kind of have that experience to add to it. But pre-COVID, looking back, maybe times were relatively good for farming, compared to something like the 80s. So maybe, maybe that is a true reflection of, you know what, we're ticking along, we're doing all right, we're not, it's not disastrous, we're not taking too many risks, and maybe that's a comfortable place to be, and maybe, the sector supported that kind of thinking and bobbing along. It would be interesting to ask again now, as we face the global pandemic. Anyways, enough about that for now. On to number 2. So number 2 was the aging and retiring farmers felt it's too late to benefit.
Okay.
Which, I mean, we have something to say about all of these things. But what I would say about that is oftentimes, when you're thinking of yourself and what you need, maybe you think, I don't need a business plan, I don't need a risk assessment, but, what's in place for the next generation to take over with success? What kind of path has been laid out for them? What kind of resources have been laid out for them? So I would kind of think that even if you think, well, I'm retiring, I don't need this stuff, knowing that it's a good business practice and knowing that it's, beneficial financially, and as I'm going to talk about soon, with mental health and especially transition planning, maybe we can convince farmers to rethink around that. I mean, if they're totally exiting the business, maybe that's another story. But for the most part, the farmers we run into are looking to transition it to the next generation. So wouldn't it be great to proactively give the next generation the best chance for success? That'd be pretty cool. We also, and this is no surprise, farmers don't have the time. Of course, time is such a valuable commodity. And as well, I think, sometimes, we look at farm business management as, okay, I'm running the farm, I'm doing all my production stuff. And then at the end of the day, when I've done everything else and I've got half an hour to spare, I'll go to the office and do my farm business management stuff. If we could find a better way to integrate it into kind of the everyday, on a practical level, so that you're more proactively referencing your business management thinking for your decision making on the spot, and trying to integrate the office stuff into more of the everyday. I think that would help, making it more practical, more tangible. And I mean, there's going to be very strategic level thinking and visioning and values and things like that. But how can we bring that into the practical? Is it, putting the vision on the wall in the barn? Is it putting the values on the wall in the barn? Is it, making sure that we take, a day every quarter and just have a business focused meeting for part of that day? So I think we can do some work around that. One of the other barriers was farmers don't know where to start. And that's completely understandable. I think we find that in every single element of managing the business. This is highlighted phenomenally in transition planning. Where do I start? Is it my job? Is it their job? Is it whose job? And then where do we go, even if we make a start? And how do we not fall off the, fall off the road, not knowing where to go next? So not knowing where to start. I think the good news is for that one is there are an abundance of farm business assessment tools out there. So I think maybe even the best place to start would be going to something like farmbusinessassessment.com, which has a free resource to basically look at all the different elements of farm business management. So marketing, finance, people, transition, strategy, all that stuff. And you go through a really simple self-assessment tool to figure out, where am I? And how does it compare to the best practice? And therefore, what do I need to do about this? And it helps you kind of create this triage approach to, these are the things I should probably concentrate on because they're most impactful for my business. And, you can start to kind of nip at that elephant one bite at a time. So maybe you start with, a visioning exercise, or you start with let's move the budget online or something like that. But I think that would kind of help give us an idea where to start. And the cool thing about this assessments is I mean, A, they're free, which is always pretty cool. But B, I mean, you can take it, but you can also encourage other members of your farm team to take it. So mom and dad and sister and brother, all take it, come together and discuss how they responded. Because in some instances, maybe dad says, oh yeah, transition planning, no problem, got it all figured out. And maybe mom's sitting there shaking her head saying, no, we don't. Or maybe the kids have a different opinion, right? So it kind of helps maybe prime some of those conversations about what should we concentrate on, how should we, enter into this farm business management realm. And remember, there's lots of events out there. You can go to, conferences and workshops and things like that, where you can start to dip your toe in without, diving in the entire pool. So, that's kind of a good way to start as well. And I mean, there's tons of advisors out there that are ready and willing to help you along the way. And bonus, for most provinces and territories, there's some funding available to help subsidize those costs. So again, you can kind of try before you buy.
Love it. Okay, that is the barriers. And I think you touched on the drivers a little bit.
Yeah, yes. And I will perhaps touch more fanatically on the drivers. Yeah, and the one thing I would say too is something that kept coming up over and over, which I think I've kind of mentioned, or it's been between the lines, was this lack of communication skills seems to be a huge barrier to engaging in farm business management activities. So, say the kids, the next generation are super enthused, but they can't seem to make any headway with the parents. Or a lot of times we hear, one of the spouses really wants to go forward with XYZ practice and the other, kind of doesn't want to know. Or even, if it's sister's farming or brother's farming, it's, lacking the ability to convince others and get them on board with some of these practices. Because some folks are just, wired not to rock the boat, not to try anything different. If it's working for us, that's fine. And I mean, 41% of our farmers said, nope, we're succeeding without it. So then, the other half of the farmers have that to contend with and say, but what if we could do better? Or what if we could find a way to help us sleep at night? Anyways, on to the motivators or the drivers or the enablers, however you want to phrase it. So, and these are kind of in the order of what came out from the results. So the first one was to increase profitability, which is great because, I mean, that's the wording that was used when we were kind of, put into commission back in 1992, was to, provide the resources to help farmers achieve greater profitability. Even though now we realize that in order to get profitability, you have to do a lot of other stuff, including managing risk. But profitability, great. We would say, hey, did you know we did a dollars and cents report in 2015 that says this will bring you profitability? So profitability is a motivator for some. Also, managing risk. So number 2 was to manage risk, to decrease uncertainty, which is good. And that's kind of what surfaced from the kind of Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms report as well, was that, hey, if we can decrease some uncertainty here in a very uncertain world, I'm all for it. Number 3 was to prepare for farm transfer or retirement. So that's good as well. And some people chuckle at me, but I kind of have started saying that, farm transition planning is like the gateway to farm business management. Because there seems to be this realization that eventually I won't be able to farm anymore, like physically, and not to get morbid, but we only have a certain lifespan. So eventually, something's going to have to happen to the farm. And we tend to have more success in having conversations led by that instead of something like, well, you should business plan so you know where you want to go and how you want to get there and who's on board. It's more like, what do you want to happen to this farm legacy, and can we start talking about that? And And what are you going to do once you pass on the reins? And how many reins are there? And how many people are there to pass them on to? And how is everyone going to work together? So there seems to be more of a kind of appreciation of almost like relevancy and here and now in solving an issue by concentrating on farm transfer as a way into those conversations.
I could see that connection.
Yeah. And it's interesting because then we circle back around and we say, well, business planning is really just farm continuity planning. So it's all really transition planning when you think about it.
Well, I could see farmers, and it's human nature, right? Things are good enough, like you're studying, right? So you're farming, and then all of a sudden, oh, we got to do the transition planning. So now it's a point in time where they have to start. I can see the connection. That makes sense. That makes
it's
sense
interesting.
From a human psychology point of view.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then, so it's cool because the next two usually don't kind of surface on these types of scales or rankings. And it's great because it ties into our next conversation about mental health. But number 4 was to reduce stress and anxiety and improve quality of life. So like, okay, cool. So those farmers that said I'm succeeding without it, what's their stress and anxiety level like? What's their quality of life level like? And that leads us into the final driver or motivator, which is to improve our family and farm team harmony. So again, what does success look like to you? And if you started kind of looking at success in terms of profitability, managing risk, preparing for retirement, managing stress, anxiety, and having farm team harmony, are you getting a passing grade in all of those? And maybe they are. Maybe there's some that are, and I hope there are. But I think it asks a really important question and a really good point of conversation and discussion and reflection, especially with members of your farm team.
Love it. That is fantastic. So was there anything that shocked you for a loop with this study?
Yeah. So, and this is where kind of the drum roll comes in, because as you know, we were doing a study update to see the adoption of practices 2015 versus 2020 pre-COVID. And so the shocker to us, and maybe it's not a shocker and a reflection, but certainly when I first got the report, I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, did we reverse the numbers here? So we've got, here's all the business practices. I think there's 22 of them. I'm like looking at my screen right now with them just so I can speak to numbers. And so we've got the 2015 adoption rate and the 2020 adoption rate. And the shocker is that no practices have increased in adoption. Like none.
In 5 years.
So the best we've hoped for is, like, from the results, the best we see is they've remained steady. So communicating plans in the direction of the farm with key stakeholders, 39%, 5 years out. Now we get to some of those practices I talked about, the top 7 practices, and that's where we see a significant difference, and we're kind of scratching our heads saying, what in the what? Like, either we're doing a really bad job or something else is going on. So for something like having a clear vision and setting goals for the farm, it's moved from 43% to 31%.
Went back
down. Yeah. So from 2015 to 2020, we're down. We're also down in having a written business plan that's reviewed and updated at least once per year, having a budget and plan for each enterprise within the farm. What's another one here? Having a structured approach to financial planning and ensuring sufficient capital to withstand changes in the business environment. I wonder if that's coming to bite anyone in the bum now. Having a formal risk management plan and procedures in place to assess and manage risk is down. Having a collaborative relationship with suppliers and customers. One of the I guess worst practices, which just It kind of breaks my heart because especially with COVID, there's been so much talk about labor and managing people and keeping good people and making sure they're safe. So having a well-developed human resource management plan outlining responsibilities, compensation reviewed regularly to meet changing business needs is down from, it wasn't great before, it was 20% before, not great, but business planning was only at 21%, mind you, down to 12%. So I thought with all the conversations we've had about the importance of, employee turnover and the cost of that and things like that, how are we, doing so much worse in terms of our planning? And then the other piece, you remember the number 4 practice, differentiating top and bottom farmers, was using farm business advisors to help meet business objectives. That's down from 32% in 2015 to 23% in 2020. And the number 1 practice, which was actively seeking learning and skills development opportunities to meet the changing needs of the business, is from 49% in 2015 to 41%. And yeah, so I would have to say all of those results were shocking to us. Yeah. Like we couldn't believe it. And I mean, I guess the best explanation we might have is, and this is what, we talked to our advisors and we're like, do you know what's going on? No, do you know what's going on? Is, when business is good, we tend to neglect our business management practices. And it kind of takes a crisis or an emergency or an issue that could have horrible repercussions in order to kind of get us to sit up straight and look at some of these things a bit more seriously. We would hope that, maybe coming out of COVID, we can expect maybe there's a new norm, maybe there's a new appreciation for assessing risk and putting a plan in place. If nothing else, I can understand how maybe coming out of COVID, maybe just like strategic discussions about our vision and mission and maybe our transition plan, 20 years down the line might look a little bit differently right now as we're dealing in the here and now and putting out fires. But hopefully some of those practices that really do deal with the here and now, which is, the financial analysis and planning and contingency planning might hopefully kind of take a turn for the better in terms of adoption. But yes, asking what shocked us in the study was basically the study results in themselves. For sure. Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, I can't publish this. Of course we have to, because it's the reality and we have to, we can't sugarcoat it. It's like something's going on here. What the heck is it? And how can we help?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So unless you want to touch on that a little bit more, I would like to know what the study recommendations are, because I think you guys structured different parts and the final part is the recommendations.
Yeah, exactly. There's kind of here's what we tried to do. Here's how we tried to do it. Here's what we found out. Oh my God. And here's what we're going to do about it. So yeah. So, and these won't be surprising because I think it kind of weaves through the conversation we've had thus far, but certainly is how can we redefine and help producers redefine the value of farm business management by redefining what success looks like. So looking at it, both business focused and personal focused, but beyond how we typically define success. And maybe those producers, the 41% producers that said we're succeeding without business practices, maybe they're profitable and that's their definition of success. But if we could unpack that a little bit and kind of, peer behind the curtain and say, but is everything all good? Like, are you sure? Maybe we can make some headway that way. We also found that, I didn't go into this too much in this presentation, but we did find a few demographic differences between how folks respond, like just because you're here. So for example, female farmers responded with higher adoption rates than their male counterparts, as did young farmers. So I think what we're going to try and do is try and create some, targeted messaging and maybe some targeted programs at those groups to kind of, further support them and further support the people that, believe in this stuff and want more and need our support to guide them. It's actually, it reminds me of a study that we were involved with. I think it was back in 2016, and it was called the baseline study of attitudes towards farm business planning or something like that, with the Agri-Food Management Institute out of Ontario. And what we were able to do is, based on attitudes towards planning, segment the population of farmers by, what's your attitude towards planning. So we had the skeptics, and we had the strugglers, and we had the planners, and we had kind of the innovators or entrepreneurs, and then we had the sunsetters. And so by seeing farmers in kind of the different attitudes towards planning, we could say, well, the skeptics, do we want to spend time convincing them, or do we want to shift our attention to the strugglers and the planners and the innovators and the sunsetters to say, hey, we can help you. Here's how we can help you. So, looking at how we can do that a little better. And then as well, how can we help develop, some sort of like a communication guide for producers to talk about this stuff, whether it's with advisors or members of their farm team or their family. But how can we help producers? And I don't know the answer to this yet, but, kind of exploring how could we help develop the communication skills and practices to have those conversations about business management, about changing some of the management activities on the farm, and find courage and confidence and success in that. So it's interesting. We had a producer come to our AGAX conference. I believe it was in Calgary in 2016. And he was the son-in-law on the farm, entering into the farm. And he really, really wanted his father-in-law to do a business plan. And the father-in-law had every reason in the book why he wouldn't do it. And so anyways, he had kind of told us this story and had, come to the conference as a result of it. And then afterwards he reported back and he said, oh my gosh, he's like, coming to the conference and being surrounded by people who have totally experienced this. Some have had success, some haven't, some are still trying to make it through. But he's like, I went back to that farm and everything that he, kind of poo-pooed against, I had, kind of my argument ready to go, and we're doing a business plan. So it's like giving, and those stories just like warm my heart, like to just like maximum capacity is just like, that's what it's all about. How can we help you, kind of move down the path that is right and you want to move down. So that was really good. And then I think, and you'll see this come back in the Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms, which is so funny how, they're totally different studies, totally different partners we were working with, totally different groups of people we were working with, but a lot of the findings are very complementary, which I hope is a good thing. But one of the last recommendations was, trying to increase the accessibility and availability of risk management and scenario planning tools, and trying to kind of focus on, the risk management language and meeting farmers where they are instead of where they could be or might be. Seems to be really important. Like, what is going on for you right now and how can we help? And then, hopefully drawing that into a greater business management conversation. But if we just talk about where do you want to be in 5 years without realizing the reality of the situation, then I think we've lost a real opportunity there.
Okay, excellent. What a great study. Packed with great information. I don't love some of the results, but you know what? It can't always be upwards. And I imagine you guys are right. If times are good, well, you loosen the reins a little bit, right? When you really have to get that pencil out and pencil everything in, you're probably going to be a better farm manager, and it's probably going to be top of mind, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
And the real troubling thought is, when you do find yourself up the proverbial creek, it's probably not a good time to be trying to, think of where do we want to go and what do we want to be? Like you're doing crisis management, which isn't the same as strategic management. So, oftentimes when we talk about business planning, we say it's got to be like the right people, the right time, the right place. And by time, it's not during a crisis situation. It's when things are relatively like low key on the farm. Relatively, I say, because things are never low key, but, find a time when it's a little bit, less hectic. And then the right place, oftentimes we say, get away from the farm, like go somewhere else so that you're not, checking your phone or looking out the window or seeing who's in the driveway or like, there's kind of a science to this stuff. And I think that speaks to, okay, well, we'll worry about our budget when we get into financial trouble or when we sniff a little bit of trouble. Well, it would be probably a lot better to kind of, thinking of the Titanic, to kind of see that iceberg like way in advance so you can, take little measures to kind of steer your ship in the right direction instead of having to do something, drastic or dramatic like, oh my gosh, we need debt mediation right here, right now. As opposed to, hey, maybe we should look at our costs. Maybe we should look at cutting back a bit, here. Maybe we should look at how we're investing here. Da, 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 da.
Well, that's exactly it. If you're a farm business manager and if you have the tools and the practice in place, you're running a tight ship, so to speak. We'll go with the Titanic wording here. You're running a tight ship. And if you're paying attention, you see the iceberg coming, and because you've been paying attention and being a strong farm business manager, maybe you can just bypass that iceberg. Sometimes we can't, but if we are strong in our business, we can weather the storm. How's that for a whole lot of ship analogies?
I love it. That worked really well, better than I was expecting.
We think alike.
Yeah.
Well, that is really good. Great information. And I know there's so many people in the industry that are passionate about helping farmers with the farm business part of their farm. And you guys are there to do that. I love, maybe that's the geeky part in me, but when you have a study, you have a real accurate picture of what's going on, good or bad, at least you know where you're at and where you can go from there, rather than, well, we think farmers are adapting these processes, doing better. My goodness, we're talking about it all the time. Things that ought to be getting better. Well, they're not. Why, right? I love information. So,
well, and it's like going to the doctor for a checkup, right? So how are we really doing? Like, oh, I feel fine and I'm breathing okay and, no problem going up the stairs. But you go to the doctor and they might see something that isn't in your periphery to see. So it's important to kind of have these checkups and shakeups every now and again.
I love it. Okay, before we roll into the second study, which is Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms, do you want to touch on this one at all, or did you say everything you want to cover?
I think it's good. I would just say that, the full report's available on our website, Farm Management Canada's website. And we have, lots and lots of detailed information. If anyone's interested in kind of diving into very detailed reporting, we have that too. So feel free to get in touch. And then you'll see some of these results being kind of sprinkled out through our social media platforms. So we've released the preliminary findings kind of in a bit of a boring newsletter, but we're trying to make it sexy for you, Tracy, and use some nice visuals and graphics. So look out for those, and we would just encourage you to, take a minute to reflect on what this is telling us, and perhaps most importantly, if there's a way that we can work together on the recommendations, or if you want to, take recommendations and run with them, we would be, more than happy for that to happen. Our goal is to influence improvement, to cultivate excellence in farm business management. So however we can do that and use the results and, not let this study just sit on a shelf and get dusty, but really try to affect change and trying to meet the needs and listening to what we're hearing is really what we're going for. So yeah, I think that's the last thing I would say about the dollars and cents study.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. Now, here's the one I really want to dive into, and I think that is perfect order. We covered that one. Now let's chat about the second study. Share that with us, please.
Yes. So we called this one Healthy Minds, Healthy Farms. If we had another little comma, it'd probably be Healthy Farmers as well.
I keep on saying farmers. And
yeah.
Farms and farmers to me is interchangeable because you don't have a farm without a farmer, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we thought, well, and the mines, obviously that's related to the farmers. So anyways, enough about syntax and linguistics. But yeah, so what we wanted to do was, now I'm trying to think, okay, I remember, because I was trying to think, what even got us interested in this topic? I remember. So I was at a conference of the Canadian Young Farmers Forum, who are great. They're our sister organization for young farmers doing all this business management stuff, which is awesome. So I was at their conference, and I believe it was in Saskatoon, and they had a speaker by the name of Doc Com, and he's David Posen out of Toronto. And so he was talking about stress, and he was talking about, the effect that stress can have on us, good or bad, because there's not always bad things about stress. And then he was talking about, the impacts of, prolonged or sustained, high stress. And he started talking about things like the, inability to make decisions, the inability to prioritize, to concentrate, to sleep, to pay attention to detail and things like that. And so I was sitting there as just a listener and thinking, well, in the work that we do, it's crucial that you know how to prioritize, you know how to make decisions, that you are, detail focused on the business management side and things like that. So I said, so I wonder what's the connection between stress and managing the farm? And then I thought, well, wait a second. I mean, I know that when we tell farmers, hey, you should have a business plan, it's really, really good for you. There's a deer in headlights look, and I'm sure it instills like fear in their hearts for a lot of folks. So I said, I kind of want to explore the connection between mental health and farm business management, both in terms of how does one support the other, but also how does one hinder the other? Because maybe there's a, short-term pain for long-term gain. Maybe we say, you got to do your business plan, and maybe it's super stressful and super difficult, but once you get through it and you have it in place and you have those mechanisms at your disposal, then maybe, you're in a much better place. So we wanted to explore all this and see what the heck is really going on in terms of that connection. And I mean, most importantly, how can we support mental health? How can we support farm business management? And how can we better understand the connection between the two?
Love it.
Yeah.
Great.
So
hey,
I was like, where'd that idea come from again? Oh yeah. Yeah. So this study, I mean, it's funny because when we set out to do this study, I mean, we did not know how we were going to even figure this out. Like, what are the questions you ask and how do you ask them? And mental health is such a careful topic, right? Like, you have to be really careful about what you ask and how you ask and things like that. So it's interesting because I was like, yeah, I just want to know on the business management side, what can we do to better support mental health and to explain the connection. But the group we were working with, the consulting group, and we also worked with a national advisory committee, said, let's just go nuts and just look at, stress in general and, anything related to this, like we did a huge environmental scan, any literature related to mental health, farming, farm business management, entrepreneurship on the farm, and just figured out what are we actually dealing with, what do we know, what don't we know. And so the study actually results in kind of a pretty comprehensive look, because you'll see once we get down to the recommendations that there's 4 categories. There's 24 recommendations in this one, but there's 4 categories, including, reducing the stigma, increasing mental health literacy, improving, farm business management. And then what's the 4th one? Like basically creating and sharing programs that are going to support those activities. But anyways, so I lost my train of thought.
You're great. There's so much to cover.
I know. Yeah, right. I was talking about the comprehensive nature of the study. So it's actually kind of good because, looking back, I was like, it's not just information for us, but, we're not necessarily, we're not experts at all, and we're not positioned as, experts in, mental health literacy or, providing programming for those supporting people with, mental health challenges and things like that. But what the study does is we kind of look at, recommendation number 3 around business management, but there's, the 3 other categories of recommendations that anyone can kind of take and run with. And so I think that's the beauty of the results of the study, is that it's so comprehensive that it really gives a lot of folks in the industry an opportunity to kind of step up and take action. And those are, carefully spelt out for them. So, and based on research and science-based information, which is really good. So back to, kind of our findings and, what might have surprised us or what didn't surprise us. So our findings show that over 80% of Canada's farmers are categorized as mid to high stress score. So that's pretty alarming. And you'll remember the work of Dr. Andrea Jones-Fitton out of the University of Guelph and Brianna Hagen. And they talked about, even, stats related to that. Their work came out far before ours, but stats related to, clinical depression among the farming community and, some really, concerning stats about the mental health challenges and, the long-term effects of some of this stuff. So we, of course, wanted to ask our group, well, how would you self-report your level of stress? And so over 80% mid to high, which is concerning for sure. We found the leading causes of stress for Canada's farmers were the unpredictable nature of the industry, the workload pressures and time constraints, and financial pressures. Yeah, which is probably no surprise. Yeah. But it's interesting because, when you look at, okay, here's the stressors, but then here's the things we concentrate on as an industry. It's kind of just an interesting reflection to be like I thought, for example, public trust would be a lot higher on the list of stressors, because we hear about it all the time. Whereas we don't talk about maybe some of the workload pressures or the financial pressures as much as we maybe do about unpredictability of the ag sector. So it's just,
you know what? I got to jump in there, Heather. I think, I know farmers, there's a lot of talk about public trust. Mm-hmm. And it's important. I think when something comes up on social media, it riles the farmers up and then we get on a tear. Or if we're out and about and somebody says something silly and worrisome, that concerns us as farmers. But being a farmer and seeing Anthony, who farms day to day, the 3 that you said are bang on. Yeah. I don't think Anthony spends a large part of his day worrying about what somebody in Winnipeg thinks about what we do. When he's on social media and sees that post, he'll get fired up. But when he is being Farmer Anthony, it is the things he can't control, financial, and whatever the third one was, you were bang on. But those things there's probably a bit of a stigma to talk about some of those things, right? Thinking I had to jump in there. As a farmer, yes, we can complain about the weather and the unpredictability of it. That's okay. But I think it's not socially acceptable or comfortable to talk about financial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I'm
for sure. And even when we're looking at workload pressures, I mean,
yes.
It's really funny because, in like I have colleagues I work with and they get so frustrated because they'll email someone and say, just checking up on this. And they're like, oh my God, I was so busy. I'm so sorry, blah, blah. And I don't think I've ever heard a farmer ever say, I'm too busy, or I'm so busy, or it's just like, and I don't know why. And maybe it is kind of that stigma associated with, what you're not cut out to be a farmer or whatever if you're not going to work 24/7 and blah, 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 blah. And there's so much to unpack even in that, but it's funny to reflect on. No, I think it's really good to reflect on, what are the farmers telling us versus, when we look at industry, what does it seem like we're concentrating on as priority issues, and do they mesh up? So the interesting thing is, of course, these were the stressors, across all demographics. But when we looked at kind of chopping the demographics up, we found that women and young farmers were significantly more likely to report higher stress. And when we looked at the causes of that stress, it was around family conflict as well as transition planning.
Okay.
Which kind of makes sense to us. I mean, not that we want to, put too much interpretation on the data, but just even from our own experience, young farmers are citing a lot of frustration with transition conversations not moving forward, and their feeling of, an uncertain future, uncertain, place within the farm, uncertain about, how they even approach the topic, etc. And we find that what the women were telling us was they feel this, what they called kind of natural responsibility for the family unit. And because in farming, family and the farm and the business and everything is so tied together, they kind of feel responsible for everything going tickety-boo, as well as responsible for their own responsibilities. So, whether it's an off-farm job or whether it's taking care of the kids or working on the farm or all the above, which is typically the case, they also had this pressure of kind of, keeping all the family in harmony, keeping the team in harmony, being the shoulder to cry on, being the mediator, trying to make sure everyone's, okay to come to Christmas dinner or whatever it is. And so there were comments about that added pressure on the female side of making sure that, that the farm family stays a family. So that was really interesting for us. And then perhaps not surprisingly, growing operations. So operations that self-defined as we're expanding our operation, we're diversifying, we're this, that, and the other, we're more likely to be stressed out than kind of folks that self-defined as mature operations. So that's probably no surprise. The part I like to dig into is, of course, that connection piece between mental health and business management. And this is where we get really excited because we're like, there is a connection and they do support each other. Yay. All of our efforts have been worth it.
No surprise.
So we found that, and I should mention as well, we worked with a huge team on this, but one of the groups we worked with to do the national survey was Farm Credit Canada, and they were really awesome to work with. They know their stuff, and they really helped us kind of interpret the data. So we found from the national survey that we did that 88% of farmers who regularly follow a written business plan say it contributes to their peace of mind. Which is awesome because, we know only 21% of farmers actually do have a written business plan they follow and refer to for decision making. But the fact that, almost 100% of those farmers say this has contributed to peace of mind is really cool, and maybe gives us, when we think back to the dollars and cents study and think back to those motivators or drivers of business practices, we can start, looking at, well, these guys said it contributes to peace of mind, being able to sleep at night, et cetera, et cetera. And it's because they say, they've worked out where they want to go, possibly, what could maybe get in the way along the road and what they're going to do about it. So it's back to that assessment piece, plan A, plan B, plan C, and all the while having that dream and that goal and that vision in mind that keeps them kind of, steering in the right direction, in the desired direction, I should say. So that was really cool. And then, it was funny because we asked why or why not they, in this study as well, why or why not they follow a business plan, a written business plan. And again, the vast majority, the number one response was, we're succeeding without it. So we're like, darn it. But hey, we can work with it. It's okay. We already know. Let's redefine success and see what happens. We also looked at coping mechanisms. So we looked at, all coping mechanisms. Some are positive, some are negative. But we found that farmers who follow a written business plan tend to adopt more effective coping mechanisms. So coping mechanisms include things like, perhaps on the negative side, working longer hours, sleeping less, socializing less, not feeling in control of emotions, not being able to prioritize and make decisions, et cetera, et cetera. On the positive coping mechanism side, we have farmers reporting, that they are doing more financial analysis and planning. They are having more meetings with their team, meeting with advisors, and they're going back to the business plan and referring to that and trying to figure out, what they can do differently, how they can, remain resilient and things like that. So we found that those that do follow the plan have more effective coping mechanisms, more on the positive side. And we also found, and this is exciting, especially having just talked about dollars and cents study and knowing that our practices have, adoption of practices have gone down over the last few years, that the farmers who use a written business plan frequently follow other business practices. So it's almost like this business plan can be seen as almost a trigger to, adhering to a budget, benchmarking performance, seeking training, communicating about the future of the farm with those impacted, and some of those other best practices we see, which is awesome.
Hold on. I got to interrupt you. The business plan is the gateway drug for farm business management. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
If you get your business plan in place, it's your gateway. I shouldn't call it a gateway drug, but hey, you can get addicted in a good way to your farm business management practices, right? If you have one, like you said, you continue to get more. Sorry, anyways.
No, that's perfect. And per our previous conversation about drivers, I would say, transition planning or thinking about farm transition is almost like the first gateway into the business planning, which is the gateway into all the other stuff. So, and I think it's kind of simple when you think about it, because the importance of the business plan isn't having this, thing that sits on a shelf like, oh, look at my, 40-page business plan that I paid an advisor to do for me. That is not what we mean by business planning. It's, facilitating the coming together of the different stakeholders, and it's the process of working through, what do we want to be when we grow up? What do I bring to the farm? What do you bring to the farm? What else do we need to the farm? What does the future look like? And kind of creating this vision and kind of path that guides you towards where you want to go, where you all want to go. So it's not just, mom or dad or whoever, saying, this is where we're going and that's it, and hop on the train or get off or whatever. But it's like, what does everybody want in this? And is there a way to facilitate that so that everyone, can kind of get on board and get excited about where we're going with this thing and the role within it? So don't forget to, don't just do that default, like, oh, you're the daughter-in-law, so you'll do the bookkeeping, or, you're the this, that, or the other, so you'll do that. But it's really taking a good hard look at, like, what are our assets here? What skills do people bring, but also what's their passion, and how can we feed that while at the same time feeding that into the business? Because, you're going to work as hard as heck on something that you love. Like Tracy, that's why you and I do what we do, because we love it and we believe in it. If somebody asked me to spend my life, doing accounting, for example, it's just not my thing. It doesn't wake me up in the morning. It doesn't, it's not my last happy thought before bed. It just isn't. So if I can kind of feed my monster that loves business management and writing about it and thinking about it and talking about it, like, that's what feeds my soul. So the farmers need to figure out what is it that feeds your soul and all those folks around you, so that you can kind of stay well fed together, as that metaphor falls apart very quickly on me, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Okay, that's good stuff.
Yeah. And it was also interesting. I mean, we didn't really, like, it wasn't a main point of the survey whatsoever, but we also asked about farmer optimism, which was really interesting, because if I remember correctly, I didn't write this down in my notes, but I'm pretty sure our results showed a third of farmers are optimistic, a third of farmers have very low optimism, and then, of course, there's kind of the mushy middle. And we found that the farmer optimism tended to have a correlation with farmers adopting more effective coping mechanisms and business practices as well. I mean, I don't know what we can do about farm optimism in terms of, practical terms, maybe some of the ag more than ever stuff, or some of the celebrating ag stuff out there, but farm optimism does have a role to play in mental health, coping mechanisms, and business practices, which is a point of interest.
I have to jump right in there. And to me, I see farm business management as the foundation of it all. If you are not a strong farm business manager and you happen to get by because it's good years, good. And I hope you and every farmer out there does well forever and ever. Amen. But if you are a strong business manager, farm or not, you're going to run a great practice. And you know what? If you're running a strong business and planning and you're intentional and all things go according to plan, you're going to be happy. There's going to be no great surprises. And guess what? You're going to like farming. But you know what? If you don't have a strong business foundation, you don't have a business plan, you don't have a budget, and everything's willy-nilly and you're spending without a plan, you're going to overspend. The farm's going to lose money. And guess what? Sorry, I'm a bit on an angry rant here, because there is nothing that drives me more bananas than people that poo-poo on farming, but yet I see them go out and buy XYZ, and I know they can't afford XYZ. No, farming's not the problem. You're not a strong farm business manager. You want to love farming? Make sure you do your business right.
Yeah.
There's Tracy's rant for the day.
I like it. I like it. I agree 100%. You kind of get what you give. There's no more sailing by. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so where do you want to take it? Recommendations?
Yeah, so I mean, I won't go through all 24 recommendations by any means. And in fact, I think I might just concentrate on the business management ones, because you're going to see how it kind of links to some of the dollars and cents stuff too. So the recommendations around recommendation number 3 of the group of 4. And by the way, all the recommendations are in the full report, available on our website and all that wonderful stuff, as well as really cool graphic images and GIFs and things to kind of further explain the results. But yeah, particular to farm business management, the insights we gained was taking a preparedness approach and trying to change the language and perceptions around farm business planning. And so what was written in the report was planning ahead doesn't mean predicting the future. It means preparing for whatever might happen in the future, which is a shift of how we think about farm business management, I think, because a lot of times it's, I can't do a business plan. Everything's crazy. Everything's up in the air. I can't predict what's going to happen. But again, planning is about assessing what are the possible outcomes of what's happening and everything we know about them, and how do we plan for the best, the worst, and the most likely. And let's just, because it gives you a reference point to kind of say, are we on track or aren't we? Otherwise, like you say, we're willy-nilly just guessing and making decisions, from the edge of our seats kind of thing. So linked to the idea of the preparedness approach and not trying to predict the future, but just, trying to have a plan in place for whatever may happen, is a risk management approach. So we find that risk management seems to be a language that better resonates with farmers in the context of business management. Okay. And in the context of connecting back to that idea of peace of mind. And when you think of the top stressors, it was uncertainty was the top one. So, and, workload pressures, financial pressures. So if we can find a way to alleviate some of that uncertainty and some of those pressures, through kind of risk management language and risk management approach. And again, meeting the farmers in the here and now rather than the there and then, especially in the COVID environment that we're in. Farmers aren't thinking about, where am I going to be in 10 years, la-di-da. It's like, oh my gosh, what does this week look like? What does this month look like? And then the third piece is just around a team approach. So realizing that, building your support teams involves advisors, yes, and those are part of the dollars and cents best practices, but also family and peers and how they can help alleviate pressures of decision making. So, bringing some of your family members into the conversation, bringing advisors into the conversation and some of your peers. And, we do see producers becoming more interested and more involved in peer advisory groups because guess what? They can kind of, let down their guard and let their hair down in my case and, share this is what's going on. Like, has anyone else experienced this? Or I'm part of a program right now at University of Guelph, and it was so nice because my conversation yesterday was kind of just venting to someone else who's in a similar position to me. And it felt really good to know I'm not alone, but we've each realized our little successes and how can we, share those with each other so that we're able to benefit. We're both benefiting rather than kind of throwing our hands up in the air and saying, I can't do this. It's crazy. But, how can we leverage the team around us and build the team around us as too? So having a good hard look at, who's on your bus, who's influencing your decisions, and does that need to change, or do we need to, get a bigger bus and get more people on board? And how are you going to, create that mechanism of support for you, and not just for the business, but definitely for the mental health side. More and more producers are getting, life coaches, personal coaches, professional coaches, and I know in the previous session that we did, Tracy, we talked about our farm leadership program, our national program, and it really concentrates on this idea of the connection between mental health and surrounding yourself with people that are going to help drive your success, and how you can create better relationships, better interpersonal relationships, but also empower those around you to help feed into the good, and make progress that way. So
love it. So those are the top. I know there's a lot, but those are okay. Yeah, fantastic. So is there anything else that you want to share about the healthy minds or healthy farms? Or even anything you want to loop back to about the dollars and cents study before we wrap up?
I think I keep coming back to this this idea of we're succeeding without it. Like 41% of farmers say in both studies, we don't need business management, we're succeeding without it. So again, like I just think that it's time to reassess how we're defining success for ourselves, but also for those that we're working with. And I think that's where we can open up some of those maybe difficult conversations around transition planning. So, spouse, what does success look like for you professionally and personally? What does success look like for you, son, daughter, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, whatever? Because I think that there's a conversation that needs to happen there. And I think there's kind of more than meets the eye to that success piece. And some of the drivers that we talked about earlier kind of hint to that. But I think it's kind of a nice place to start because it gets you thinking about, all the possibilities and all the hopes and dreams. And I think that's a really good place to start. And then coming back to reality and saying, okay, where are we today? And how do we get to where we want to be? And who can help us along the way? And I think that would really help create that path forward.
I love it. When I hear good enough, it just irks me, as you know, from my last little rant, because to me, you can always do better. And that kind of shows my hard driving nature. But what is good enough, like you said, I love this quote, good, better, best. Never let it rest till your good is better and your better is best. That's one of my favorite quotes, because if you think you're doing good enough, but you have some financials and you see you're doing 20,000 miscellaneous every year consistently, and where is that going? My goodness, 20,000 a year could make land payments to expand the farm to make it profitable for your son or daughter or multiple to join. Yeah. So what is good enough, right? Mm-hmm. And I love that you're here planting that seed, right? And doing these studies and bringing that awareness. That's fantastic.
And I think as well, like one of the things that I think about too is, I think about those stressors, and I think about, we've talked about the unpredictability of the ag sector and what you can do about that. But, these workload pressures and, especially, connected to the mental health piece. And sometimes, maybe you have to do a little bit of legwork on the business management side, but really you should be able to find a way, or we're hoping that, it ends up in working smarter, not harder. So we're not trying to cram more hours into the day and keeping you away from your family or keeping you away from your friends or vacations or whatever, kind of recharges you. But we're hoping that, by looking at planning ahead, by looking at what are the possibilities and what are my possible paths, that it saves you time later. And I'm trying to think, oh my gosh, I have this quote and I have it on a PowerPoint slide. And I'll have to send it to you afterwards, but it's about the effectiveness of planning. And I think it said for every minute of planning, you save, I think it's, 10 hours in implementation, something like, anyway, I'll find it for you, Tracy, because I was just like, wowza, like that is so true. I mean, it takes a little bit of work up front, but then you find ways of working smarter and not harder. And you free up your time, when you have this, mechanism for decision making and everybody kind of knows their role and what's going on, you start realizing how much time it frees up from you just, spending your time putting out fires or running from this to that and not really having a sequence or a process or a way to prioritize. You start to see the huge benefits of having some of this stuff in writing and being able to call it up, in a moment and say, does this make sense? Are we doing this? Yes or no? Instead of spending, 2 weeks wallowing about it. So, and perhaps making the wrong choice.
Amen, sister. That was great. I think those are amazing final words of wisdom. Unless you want to top that, is there anything else you want to add as we wrap up?
Okay. Now I feel pressure to top it. I don't know if I can.
That was great. I don't think you can say much more. We know the importance, and I love so much that you guys are doing that work, that you are leading the ship over there and doing very important work on behalf of farmers. Thank you. I highly doubt you guys ever hear that enough, but thank you. It's important. And I truly believe that every farmer is going to come to farm business management at the right time. So thank you guys for the work you do. One final reminder, if they want to find all of your resources, where do they go?
So I would say just because it's, it's there and it's just resources, it's no blah, blah about our organization, is if you go to www.takeanewapproach.ca, that brings you to our National Farm Business Management Resource Center, where you'll find information on all of our programs, but also everything that we found across the internet in terms of resources, tools, calculators, events that will help build your business acumen. So check out our National Resource Center and you'll find everything that you've ever wanted. And if that's still not enough, then feel free to find me on social media or email me, and we're happy to tell you everything we know about anything you want to do with business management.
Perfect. And they can find those 2 studies there as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, Heather. I love that you are so passionate about farm business management as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you guys for joining us on another episode. If you liked it, which I know you did, like it, share it, and subscribe, and we'll see you on next week's episode. Bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.